Good evening. I call to order this conditional use hearing for the Chester County Immediate Unit at 40 Moores Road on this day of August 9th, 2023. And I will turn over the hearing to our solicitor, Bernadette Kearney.
Good evening. This is a continued hearing from the last Board of Supervisors meeting, and originally we had scheduled it for July 31st. We had continued it on the record for July 31st, and that didn't work out. So we did re-advertise, so I'm going to mark a series of exhibits. T14 is the July 25th letter to the Daily News for the legal advertising for the today's hearing. T15 is the July 25th, 23 letter to the parties of the hearing date and time, which is today at 5:30, and also an email to Mr. Riper of the date and time for today. And T16 is the proof of publication of the hearing. And I did see that Mr. Lutz is here, and we have 4 other parties: Lester Craig, Kent Kingen, and Michael and Cheryl Ann Bernard. I do see that Mr. Riper is present. And Mr. Riper, I will turn it over to you.
Before you start, I just want a technical thing. If you're going to be talking about any exhibits, the lower screen is not visible from here. I don't know if we can get that. It's not working? I can turn this on. Well then, as long as the public can see something.
I can see that one still. Yeah, you know what, I'm sorry, I did not think about the board yet. I can't reach that. Not even on the chair.
Good.
Am I good to go?
I'm sorry.
No problem. When we concluded the last hearing, I think there were 2 issues, one of which was the issue having to do with the proposed new entrance on Moores Road, and the other issue had to do with the issue relating to tree removal. Based on those 2 issues, or as a result of those 2 issues, we asked our traffic consultant, Brian Kevany, to take a look and do a comparison between using the new entrance versus eliminating the new entrance and using only the existing entrance into St. Gobain. Mr. Kevany prepared a supplemental traffic letter, which I did send a copy to the township, but I'd like to mark that as Exhibit A14, which is a letter dated from Pannoni Associates, dated August 2nd, 2023. I'll just briefly summarize, and Mr. Kevany is here tonight if the board has any questions of him, but the basic conclusion, I believe, in his letter was that while the existing entrance is a safe entrance, the proposed entrance is a safer entrance because of the site distance from a rise on the north side of Moore Road. And the other observation that he made was that the traffic that would likely come into our property will come from the south, which basically directs that traffic into our site in the new entrance rather than having it go up to the existing entrance. And it would also lessen the traffic around the residents who live on the other side of Moores Road. There's more to it than that, but I think that kind of hits the high points. I do have Mr. Kevany here. I don't have any questions specifically that I would want to ask him other than what's in his letter, but if the board would like to speak with him or ask him questions, certainly make him available. The other issue, which is the tree issue, I'll just touch on that briefly. The tree issue, my understanding is there has been some discussion between representatives of the township and our consultants, and I'm not sure what the net result of that is as far as the board is concerned. So I'm at a little bit of a loss as to what to say about that, but I'm assuming the board or Ms. Kearney will tell me what the board's conclusions are. So with that, I'll just ask if the board has any questions of Brian.
I don't have any, I read the letter, I don't have any questions. It was a little confusing when I was reading, comparing the site distance from the top of the hill to the intersection, but I figured it out. So we're good. I'm okay with it.
The one thing I forgot to say, and this is one of those things where you have to make a decision as to whether you want to put this out in front of the board, but we are limited, our seller is requiring us to have all of our bus traffic go through the new entrance. We don't have a choice, and that's one of the things that is just a factor that we can't, and we've tried, but we just can't dance around that one, so.
My opinion is I agree with the proposed layout that you introduced, and I think that would be the safer route for the ingress egress of the property.
Thank you.
My thought is that I viewed the property today with your folks, and the trees that are identified to be removed for that new entrance, while you'd prefer not to do that, I think at this point in time it's reasonable, and as long as it remains to those trees that are marked there, I think I'm okay with that new entrance.
When you say marked there, they're marked on the plan that,
Actually, marked on the tree with the green tape.
are they reflected on you know what they're reflected on one of the plans, the same trees. Do you remember what plan it is? Is site plan? Tree exhibit? Oh, I'm so sorry. That's Mr. Stengel. I apologize. It's those same trees are identified on the tree exhibit. Yes. And I don't have anything, I believe we've addressed the standards applicable to the grant of a conditional use, both for the, for the educational use in the district, as well as the putting the lateral in the steep slopes and very steep slopes. I'm not sure if the board has any questions you'd like us to address, but I've looked over my notes and I think we've covered all those points. So the only other item that I would like to mention at this point is that I'd like to offer exhibits A1 through A14. I've already identified them into the record. Thank you. Ms. Kearney, I'm not sure is the court reporter holding the exhibits, or at least one copy of them, or are you holding them?
No, I think viewing the property and going over some of the issues that we had today was beneficial. I appreciated the flexibility from you gentlemen and trying to work around that. And again, I think that was very helpful in terms of understanding what's there and what is visually there. So that was good. So I'm okay with that. I guess Peter, I don't know if you have any other questions, or Rich?
No, I have not.
Turn
I
it over
don't
here.
have any questions. I apologize. Yep. I did provide Mr. Lutz with a copy of A14 because I did have
Thank
his
you.
email. Yes. Okay.
I'd like to revisit an item that was briefly discussed at the last meeting, but I did not fully understand. We were speaking about the clock tower. I was wondering,
Actually, while you're there, Mr. Riper, is it the intent of the applicant to remove the clock tower from the plans?
Yes, I overlooked Ms. Kearney share a couple of thoughts that I forgot to mention. Our client, CCIU, is willing to delete the clock tower from the building design. I apologize, trying to look in three places at once. The couple of other things that Ms. Kearney and I discussed, one had to do with the limitation on the number of students at 170, which is agreeable to the applicant, as well as the limitation of staff to 110. And I think, as Mr. Orlo brought up at the last hearing, we do understand if there's any expansion of the building that would require a future conditional use application for that expansion. I did ask Ms. Kearney on the increase in the number of students or staff, whether the board would be agreeable to having us simply make a presentation to the board justifying that request as opposed to a conditional use application, but I'll leave that to whether you think that's a way to frame that condition. One of the other things we talked about was the fact that we're agreeable to the fact that no court adjudicated placements of students will be at this facility, and we refer to the other aspect of the CCIU services as the CCIU Learning Center, and I think I wanted to make that a little bit more specific, and it's I want to make sure I say this correctly.
Okay, I had something in my notes, so go ahead.
The Learning Center is used as an alternative education facility for troubled youth, which is, I'm not sure exactly who comprised that group, and Mr. Lubitsky could help us, but I just wanted it to be a little bit more defined, other than just Learning Center, and distinguish it from the children that we've talked about that will be at the facility. I don't know if you have any questions about that, but we are agreeable to that limitation.
So in simple terms, are any of the students that are coming in the enrollment of the 170 similar to the children that are at the Township building that has needed quite a bit of a police presence to, no?
No.
All right.
So the description of the students not to be at this facility are ones that are involved with alternative education for troubled youth. Those are excluded.
The excluded,
Okay,
so we had covered those points. I wanted to acknowledge on the record that those limitations that the board have indicated to us, they're acceptable to the applicant. Nothing further.
Yeah, we'll have a series of proposed conditions that we'll read off to you, including those. But I wanted to let Mr. Lutz, and if anybody else is in the audience, specifically Mr. Craig, Mr. Kingen, or Mr. or Mrs. Bernard, if they had any questions or comments before we got to that.
I do have a follow-up question. On the clock tower, there was an identification wall sign. How do you intend to identify your site?
We would have. Joseph Lubitsky, Director of Administration with Chester County Intermediate Unit. We tend to have it's referred to as a monument sign at the entrance of the school on Moores Road. And then we would have the name of the school in front of the building, sides. It would not be a key type of sign that was shown in the initial rendering.
Do you have an actual size of? I'm reading your mind, Martin. Do you have the actual size of the of the sign? Will it be LED? Is it, what's the description of it, do you know?
If we could pull up the exhibit that has the rendering, they show, and it won't be LED. Yeah, I guess a static sign. That's the correct.
We must have standards in our ordinance on backlit signs and how far they can shine or not shine.
And we would comply with them. I'm not sure if this rendering, that particular Child and Career Development Center, Great Valley, that's within their compliance, but that's the sign that at least was initially proposed, identified.
Sure. Is that part of the building facing St. Cobain or facing 202?
That part of the building is facing north towards Moores Road.
Moores Road?
Yes.
Okay, all right, got it.
I'd like to make a suggestion for the benefit of the applicant and also the benefit of the residents, that we don't, down the road, have a proliferation of unnecessary signs. And that is that presently, for that whole condominium complex at 60-plus acres, there is a large sign along 202. It's a V-shaped sign, and it's basically an identification sign. And right now, what it has on it is Certainty and St. Cobain. In that, the applicant now, CCIU, is part of this overall condominium complex. In the future, they may want to add to that sign, existing sign in 202, because it's basically an identification sign for the condominium complex. So you would have 3 names rather than existing 2. Just a suggestion.
That'll be up to St. Cobain, I'm sure, if the IU even wants to ask, right?
As it happens, they control that sign, and we don't have the right to do anything. It could happen, the way Mr. Lutz says, that we might get on that sign, but there's no guarantee at this point.
I'm wearing hearing aids and everything is loud. So I think I'm on the mic. I apologize. Gentlemen in the audience, you didn't have any questions? No questions or comments? And Donna, no one on
No,
the?
no.
Okay, thank you.
In the hearing, even though this isn't a public meeting.
Why don't we go through the conditions first? Okay. So, Mr. Riper, we have a series of proposed conditions that we'd like to go through with you before the board makes a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
That's
ready?
fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
So, no court-mandated students shall be enrolled at the CCIU Great Valley. The facility shall not be used as an IU learning center, which is used for an alternative education facility for troubled youth.
It's fine.
Okay. And then, and this may have been a question Mr. Orlo had. Is there a difference between capacity and enrollment? Like, do you have children that come in the morning and then other children that come in the afternoon? Or is it?
No, they're full-time students.
They're full-time students, okay. The maximum capacity of students shall be 170, and the maximum capacity of staff members shall be 110. If the maximum capacities are exceeded, applicants shall be required to obtain further conditional use approval. And Mr. Riper did just ask this evening if, rather than coming in for further conditional use approval, he was asking if the board would be willing to hear it in the sense that he would provide information as to the increase rather than going through a formal conditional use, is my understanding, Mr. Riper.
What I was asking was whether we could make that request. The board could still say, no, we want you to file a conditional use application, but like I said the other day, if we add 3 or 4 or 5 students, the expense of going through a conditional use proceeding versus just coming before the board and making a request just seemed to be a logical relief valve.
I would think that any increase would realistically be, my thinking was this was intended to cover an increase in enrollment capacity because of a increase in the building, not the existing footprint. But I don't know what you guys think. And if that happens, odds are I won't be here. So I'll let you guys
It was, you know,
decide.
it was just a request for efficiency, but if I understand what you're saying, and if we want to just leave it at conditional use, then so be it.
Yeah, I think the big concern is, because in the proposal, it talks about, or the plan design, it talks about future proposed expansion, which I prefer to end up having a full
That's-
conditional use hearing to
That's
kind of
fine.
talk about that, depending. You know, the makeup of the students could potentially change so dramatically at that point in time. So I would be okay in the existing footprint to have, you know, maybe a 10% increase of students, a 10% increase without, other than to notify us, not to have to go through conditional use. So if your enrollment increases, you know, by a small, modest margin, that would be reasonable. But I think what we're worried about is that additional proposed structure being built.
If I think if the applicant be amiable to it, a threshold of
10%?
Of 10% or something like that would not have to go through a conditional use. Is that what you're getting to?
And no expansion of the building, you're saying, if I'm
Of
to be
course.
clear, right? That's fine.
We could change that to the maximum capacities 170 and staff 110 if the maximum capacities are exceeded by 10%? Are you guys okay with that? The applicant shall be required to obtain further conditional use approval.
The maximum number would be 170 plus or minus 10%.
Plus,
Plus or minus 10%? Or plus 10%? Plus 10%. So in other words, I'm thinking that the maximum capacity of students shall be 170 plus an additional 10%
and same with the
staffing.
plus an additional. So just word it a little differently.
Okay, that's
Plus an
fine.
additional 10% on both.
We actually could put in the actual number, so it would be 100 and whatever, 17 plus 170, 187, if you want to put in the exact number.
That would probably be the simplest way to do it.
Okay, we're going to go 187 and then 120?
121,
121? Okay, so we'll do
that's me.
do you have it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. 187 for the students and 121.
Thank you.
Okay, the third one we have, Joe, is any potential future expansion of the facility shall require further conditional use approval. Yeah.
That's fine.
A safety protocol and/or safety standards shall be submitted during the land development process to be approved by the Township Chief of Police.
Fine,
Okay. All play areas must be fenced in.
fine.
The applicant shall work with the township to determine the best path for the sanitary sewer line, minimizing the environmental impact, particularly minimizing mature tree removal.
That's fine.
Okay. Mitigation methods to minimize slope disturbance and to prevent environmental damage to the surrounding woodlands during construction of the sanitary sewer line shall be submitted to the township and approved by the township prior to construction.
Fine.
Okay. If deemed necessary by the township and township traffic engineer, a traffic impact study shall be performed during land development process to ensure that the proposed access is designed properly and safely.
That's fine.
Right, this one is, my handwriting's a little bad, so bear with me. Outdoor lighting levels shall be kept to applicable minimum township standards for security purposes, which is to be reviewed during the land development process. And lighting shall be reviewed during land development to ensure that The lighting will not adversely affect neighboring properties. We did want to indicate that downlighting and shielding would be something that we're looking for.
That's fine.
As well as a time limit.
Oh, would that be acceptable, the time limit?
For example, Joe, like if there's parking lot lights off at 10 o'clock, for example. That sounds good for the neighbors.
Okay. Upset? No, we decided to keep that one in. Yeah. All right. Oh my God, I can't read my handwriting. The other one is applicant shall cooperate during land development with providing trail easements to the satisfaction of the township. It's already a subdivision and land development standard, so we just ask that you cooperate for the location of the trails. Okay, for the trees, bear with me. The applicant shall submit a plan showing the trees to be removed, which shall also be marked on the property, which I believe that trees to the driveway entrance are already marked. I'm not sure that the trees at where the sanitary sewer are marked, so we'd like them marked and, I'm sorry?
You should just note marked for removal.
Marked for removal, yes.
And a review approval, right?
Or potential, for removal or potential removal. Right.
So we're asking for a plan showing the trees to be marked for removal or potential removal, and also those plans would be identified out on the site, marked on the site also. Okay. And that plan would be submitted as part of preliminary land development. We weren't sure if you were coming in for preliminary, final, preliminary, so we're just going to make it preliminary.
The one thing is this, we're just going to submit that for review. I mean, is there a standard that we can tie that to or not? I just don't want to, we're going to submit that, and I assume that based on what was seen today was generally acceptable. Is that a fair statement? So basically, we're conforming to the site visit.
It is acceptable. I mean, for the sewer line, there seemed to be potentially maybe a couple different ways to maneuver and go through. So I think we'd like to just be able to have some input in terms of that aspect of it.
I know that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, okay.
What we're trying to avoid is what's on a plan is very tough to visualize in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could physically see what trees are marked and what aren't marked, it really helps us out, as we've run into many other developments where those questions have been asked and it's not that easily discernible until we have to get all the engineers out to mark everything, and then it's a lot of kind of it could be a potential lot of hand wringing for nothing. So if we just kind of take a simple step of marking the trees, it could save a lot of that.
I'm totally fine with that. And I think that, the township's basically going to give us input as to where we might save trees or do something. That's basically the purpose of the condition.
Correct.
Okay. At the proposed driveway entrance, the applicant shall provide a construction fence, and Peter's going to correct me if I'm wrong on this, no less than 4 feet from the drip line of the trees to be preserved. Is 4 feet? And applicant shall repair any damage if this condition is violated. So we don't want people, basically the concern was you put up the fence, but then they run it over.
They could potentially ignore it because I guess we'll have to leave it to you to dictate if there's going to be a penalty for not observing the
You mean like the construction workers?
construction
Yeah,
zone.
that's a recurring problem on all
It's
of
always a recurring problem. I understand unless there's stiff fines, sometimes they're not always followed. But we obviously can't control that, but we hope that you can, just to preserve a very natural buffer, very nice natural buffer from Moore's Lane.
Mr. Lobisky, I think he's been down this road a
That's
few
the
times, so I think he understands what you're driving at.
And this one sort of follows up on that one. The applicant, also along the proposed driveway entrance, shall provide a non-disturbance buffer of the existing tree stand as approved by the township during the land development process.
That's fine.
Okay. Our standard two are the applicant shall comply with the testimony exhibits presented, and that the applicant shall comply with all rules, laws, codes, ordinances, regulations of the Commonwealth of the United States of America, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, East Whiteland Township, and any other municipal entity having jurisdiction, including but not limited to any DE permits that you may need. We understand that there was 2 underground storage tanks that you recently discovered, and whether we're not sure they need to be removed or not.
They're going to be removed. But that's agreeable, obviously.
Okay. And I think I've covered them all now. I think so those conditions would be acceptable should the board decide to grant the conditional use?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then I can turn it over to the board and ask.
Captain Rich.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use 02-2023 for the Chester County Intermediate Unit, 40 Moores Road, subject to the conditions as just stated by our solicitor.
And agreed to by the
And
applicant.
agreed to by applicant.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
And passes.
much, gentlemen.
Aye.
Thank you for your
Ms.
patience.
Are there some projected timeframes so the residents can be focused on those dates?
Again, thank you for your support. We are hoping to move through the condition of the land development process over the next 10, 11 months. Our goal would be to place this out. We have to do a public bid about this time next year, and hopefully be in a position to begin actual groundbreaking in September, October of 2020. Tonight is my wife's birthday, but she's also a former township supervisor. This support gets me a little bit out of the
You better bring her dessert.
Thank you.
We're sorry to hear that.
Thank you. We can. Yes.
Is that you or me?
Yes, you can.
Conditional use hearing is adjourned.
We'll be back shortly for the regular meeting.
We're back at 6:30.